Great. Hey everybody, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Michael.
And we're with Next Step Learning, and we wanted to congratulate you first off for making it to the summer. It was a weird, long year. You made it. Good job. One thing that we've noticed that a lot of parents are concerned about is learning loss, whether that was during this past crazy year, because we know school was different for everybody, or learning loss that just typically happens during the summer anyways. And we wanted to talk in this video about how we see learning loss happening in comprehension.
So before we wanted to launch into that, we want to talk a little bit about how comprehension works. So the way that we understand what we're reading is that when we're reading it, or when we're hearing language, we are making mental pictures for that language, like a mental movie, and those individual words strung together are making that movie in our minds. And for a lot of students who struggle with comprehension, they might say after they read something out loud or after they hear something, it just goes in one ear and out the other. And part of the reason for that is that the image making that happens for so many of us isn't happening with them. And that image making is what sticks those words into our minds and helps us hold on to it so that we can recall what we read, but also understand it, talk about it, answer inference questions about it, and so on.
Yeah, so one instance to kind of give you a picture of what this looks like is that we often read a story with our students. It's one of Aesop's fables. It's about a blue jay who needs to get a drink of water. So he comes to this tall, thin jug of water, but he can't fit his head inside and the water's too low. So what he decides to do is pick up some pebbles and put in the pebbles and keep on checking how many pebbles he needs, and eventually the water gets high enough and he can drink from it. Michael, how could we see students in this situation having trouble with the story or having trouble with recall?
Yes, so one thing that might happen is a student could read a short story like that, just a single paragraph story, and at the end of it, they might know pieces of it. They might recall there was a bird, and there were some pebbles, and there was a jar, but they might not be able to piece those together in a full mental movie to recognize what was actually happening. So if you ask them, well, what was the blue jay doing in the story? They might say, I don't know, is it something with rocks? Because they captured two parts of the story, but not enough to put the whole thing together. Or a student might be able to say, oh, the blue jay was putting rocks in the glass jar. And then you might ask them, well, why was the blue jay doing that? And they might say, I don't really know, because they were making pictures for what the blue jay was doing. So they had part of the mental movie, but when they zoomed in, they weren't seeing that the rocks were making the water level rise high enough that the blue jay could drink it. And so even though they understood some of the basic mechanics of the story, they weren't able to answer those kinds of inference questions because there was pieces of that mental movie that were missing. So one of the things that we'll talk about in our next video is some ways that you at home can help your student, empower your student to be able to develop some of those skills of making that imagery automatically so that when they read something, they can recall what they were reading, but then also think critically about it in a way they'll need to in school and in life. So stay tuned.
We'll see you next week.